They represent a universe of possibility, a chance for battle-hungry comic book fans to get answers to their most hotly debated questions. What would happen if the superstars of the Marvel Universe took on the heroes of rival publisher DC Comics? Who's stronger, Superman or the Hulk? Who'd win in a fight, Batman or Captain America? Who's more verbose, Stan Lee or whoever the hell was running DC at that moment? For years, these questions were only conjecture, but eventually the amount of money to be made convinced the twin comic book giants that it might be worthwhile to join forces every now and then. And though these pairings have seemingly run their course today, not a week goes by without some fan somewhere asking for a story uniting his favorite characters across company lines. My name is Tom Brevoort, and these are the 5 best Marvel DC crossovers. Number 1, Superman vs. The Amazing Spider-Man, 1976. It's been bettered but never equaled, the granddaddy of all intercompany crossovers. At a time when the idea of there even being a comic book featuring both Superman and Spider-Man sharing the same pages was a positively shocking idea, this enormous tabloid spent its 100 pages synthesizing and combining the narrative styles of the very different DC and Marvel House approaches into a single unified whole. The creative team of Jerry Conway and Ross Andru were the perfect choices to execute the project, having been the only creators who had regularly worked on both characters before this. The visual panache of the project was further enhanced through uncredited artists from Neil Adams and John Romita. At $2, it cost more than a half-dozen regular comics, but it was so worth it. Number 2, Marvel and DC present the Uncanny X-Men and the New Teen Titans number 1, 1982. Of the original flight of Marvel DC crossovers, none was more perfectly timed or more flawlessly executed than Uncanny X-Men and the New Teen Titans, uniting the cast of the 2 hottest and most popular series in comics. A tour de force by writer Chris Claremont with stellar artwork by Walt Simonson. If the book has a flaw, it's that it was produced so early in the history of the New Teen Titans that the characters still hadn't quite come completely into focus yet, meaning that Claremont's interpretation of them skewed more towards his own mutant sensibilities. Along with his appearance in the Great Darkness saga, this comic probably did more to make Darkseid the preeminent villain in the DC Universe than anything else. You're welcome, Zack Snyder. Number 3. Punisher Batman Deadly Nights, 1994. One of the first of the new waves of Marvel DC crossovers in the 1990s, Punisher Batman leans on the strengths of the character's common writer, Chuck Dixon, who expertly brings their worlds and worldviews into alignment and collision. But the real star here is artist John Romita Jr., at the time making his mark on the Punisher, and here cut loose to work his magic on the Caped Crusader. John was at the height of his abilities, backed up and supported by the gritty and expressive inkwork of Klaus Janson. This is a beautiful book from cover to cover. Number 4, Darkseid vs. Galactus, The Hunger, 1995. It was a coin toss between this entry and writer-artist John Byrne's other Marvel DC release, Batman and Captain America, which was set during World War II and featured a very Dick Sprang-influenced Batman. But this book is so clever and expert in overlapping the 2 universes of Jack Kirby and playing them off one another that I give it the edge. Plus, it's an underdog pick, a book you almost can't imagine being approved because it features no headline heroes whatsoever. The very fact that it's unlikely also makes it unexpected, and it delights in a way that many other crossovers fail to in finding interesting juxtapositions between its lead characters. Number 5, JLA Avengers numbers 1 through 4, 2003. The very last of the Marvel DC crossovers, and also the most fully realized thanks to its length, JLA Avengers paid off on the promise of the aborted 1983 meeting between the 2 varsity teams by bringing the then much larger squads together for the ultimate crossover adventure. Behind the scenes, conflicts ruptured the story in the 3rd chapter, so the back half kind of falls apart a little, but the real show here is artist George Perez, who both pencils and inks the entirety of its nearly 200 pages and draws literally every hero who had served with either team, and a lot more besides. Writer Kurt Busiek does more than simply put the heroes together, he explores the differences between the Marvel and DC universes as well. Did you know that the DC Earth is larger than the Marvel Earth to account for all those extra cities like Metropolis and Gotham? If there are never any further Marvel DC crossovers, it's a good one to go out on. Bonus 6th entry, Justice League of America vs. the Avengers, 1983. It exists as only a plot and 21 pages of unfinished pencils, but the original JLA Avengers crossover from 1983 is one of the great unfinished symphonies in the history of comics. The very fact that it was never completed means that each fan can imagine the finished book in their mind's eye however they like, making it the unbeatable champion because it doesn't play on the same field as any of the others. The plot was flawed, but simply the prospect of seeing the George Perez of that era handling these two mainstay teams was enough to get any fan's heart pumping. As I mentioned earlier, the regular Marvel-DC crossovers came to an end in 2003. With the expansion of both companies into global multimedia titans, it seems unlikely that the relatively small fiscal return on doing additional crossovers would be considered worthwhile. The days when both Marvel and DC were more akin to mom-and-pop shops that could put aside their differences and work as one, united in common cause, appear to be over. That said, the notion of there even being a Marvel and DC crossover was a crazy idea for many years, so you never know what tomorrow will bring. I'm Tom Brevoort, thanks for watching.